Recording is in progress, which means people are watching, which means it's time now to discuss not only what's coming up at the Nature and Science auction on June 17th at noon at live.ha.com, but it's time for me, Robert Wolonsky, the Communications Director here at Heritage Auctions, to talk to Craig Kissick, the Director of Nature and Science here at Heritage Auctions, about the state of the market and about these things that are sitting on the table in front of us that are going to be available in the sale on June 17th, beginning at noon Central. Craig, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you, Robert. Thanks for having me again.
Well, thank you for making me feel incredibly small. It's not often that I sit next to someone who towers over me, but clearly I feel as a child at a child's table sitting next to the grown-ups.
Well, I think it's our chairs too, but we'll leave that for another discussion.
Well, you flattered me, but thank you. It's good to see you. I appreciate you doing this. If you have a question for Craig, not for me, I can't imagine you have a question for me. Although if you do, this is a penguin shirt. I haven't worn it in 5 years, and I hope it looks fine. If you have a question for Craig, feel free to ask it in the Q&A. Please drop it there, and we'll get to it over the course of this conversation. But look, it's been a fascinating year in the auction business generally, but certainly in nature and science as well. There have been interesting trends in terms of what has been selling, how things have been selling, the items in which people are interested, many of which are surrounding us at this very moment. But talk to me about what the last year has been like in terms of what people have been looking for, and just the overall state of your particular category and field.
Well, I think, Robert, you have a general, there's a big push towards tangible assets. People are fearing bigger money in stocks and things like that. People want to invest in something they can hold in their hand.
Right.
And I think our category, within many of the categories, perfectly into that. So I think people really look at this as, it is a collectible. It's very fun. It's very interesting, but there certainly is a little bit of an investment. There are new folks coming into the category. I think people are starting to realize it more as a typical commoditized collectible, kind of like art would be maybe. And, we had joked about it earlier today that, how amazing that just across the little category that I cover, you've got things that are millions of years old, things from outer space. It's kind of really crazy. They're similar and they appeal to the same kind of people, but they're all very, very different. So I think that's important too. But I think we've seen seen spirited bidding and good results in our auctions. We've seen kind of both more and better consignments coming to us. So I think I think the entire level of the game is rising. And part of that is coming out of the pandemic, I think, but it's also just the change in the economics of everything. And I think people are really starting to gravitate to these kind of things that, as you said, they're inherently special. And I have the beauty of my category that literally everything we sell is truly one of a kind. There's literally can be no exact.
Everything's a one-on-one.
It really is, which is a blessing and a curse, but it's a great challenge to have.
Well, it's fascinating to me. I mean, I've got a meteorite sitting in front of me, which, by the way, makes me feel kind of warm and tingly. Is it supposed to be doing that?
No, it's actually not radioactive, so you're okay.
Well, I think people are loving and thanks to Emily, who's behind the camera, who's able to show us close-ups. This is something we weren't able to do in our previous Zooms. Right. So for those who have been joining us for these, it's terrific that you actually get to see the stuff up close for a change. But I mean, so meteorites have been interesting. In as much as that in the last year, there have been a bunch of trend pieces about how meteorites are the hot new collectible. What accounts for that, other than the fact that it's just kind of cool to own a meteorite?
Well, again, obviously, I have a huge affinity to this. I have the dream job of a 9-year-old boy, as I have shared with everybody before. And there certainly is some, and I say this with all due respect, some nerd element to what I do and what many people that are this committed to a certain kind of category might do. But I think with meteorites, I've always thought that they are so inherently cool. You're talking about pieces of the moon or Mars or things that fell millions of years ago, or things that are, they're consubstantial with nothing that's on Earth. There's not really any terrestrial material that's similar to that particular iron meteorite, which is pretty amazing to me. So, but I have seen, we've received some really high prices for lunar and Martian meteorites, especially over the last year. And I think, again, people are just realizing how incredibly cool, and again, inherently how incredibly rare. If you think about the sheer mass of it, you combine Martian and lunar meteorites, there's less than 1,000 on the Earth at all, over all the time, and all the meteorites that have fallen. That's a pretty small amount of material.
Tell me about this one, because I actually moved it to make room for my computer so I could field some questions from folks. It surprised me by how heavy it is, which also surprised me by how weak I have become. So could you tell us a little bit about this meteorite?
Yeah, this is, I mean, obviously it's gorgeous aesthetically. This is a Campo di Cielo meteorite from Argentina. It's one of the very iconic iron meteorites. You know, it was discovered as early as in the 1500s, but there are legends of native peoples making tools and stuff out of this material well before that.
Really?
It's theorized that it fell, you know, thousands and thousands of years ago, and it could represent material that's millions and millions of years old. It's pretty amazing how you can look at sort of that timeline hierarchy. This particular piece, obviously, it's a big metal rock, but as you found out, unfortunately, before, it weighs 35 pounds. So, you know, something of that size you may be a little surprised it's quite that heavy. One of the things you can see is the beautiful, you know, and I'll use it tongue in cheek, planetary surface of the material. Those thumbprint looking craters are called Rigma Glyphs. And that's one of the things that collectors look for on meteorites because it gives it such an aesthetic thing. If this was just a sort of amorphous big mass of iron, it wouldn't do a whole lot. But I mean, you can see that's the kind of piece you would see in a museum. It's got a sculptural shape. It's got all these beautiful crenellations. It's amazingly stable. It's gorgeous from every angle or vantage point. You know, there's really nothing not to like about that meteorite. It's a superb iron meteorite of certainly meteoric size too.
Well, one thing I love about the meteorites and the discussion of meteorites is where they were found, who found them, who chronicled it, how it got named. You want me to look through a little bit of that because, again, what I think is fascinating about kind of all the things we sell here,
right,
are the backstories behind them.
Right. Meteorites actually, the general convention is that they are actually often named by the nearest town or region where they're found. So that's one thing you'll hear across a lot of meteorites where a name doesn't necessarily make sense, but it's associated with the geography of where it was. If I recall correctly, the Campo di Cielo, which again was a very large fall, a huge strewn field. There's a lot of material, although with that being said, the finer pieces are of course few and far between. And that's the kind of stuff we would strive to present here are truly highly collectible pieces that would have, you know, beautiful thing of this is that this would appeal to a 10-year-old boy because it's an incredible meteorite, but this also has all the criteria that a sophisticated collector would look for too. So I think that's great. And to circle back, I'm going all off because I get excited, as you know, about this stuff.
You do?
But talking about
it's the meteorite.
It is just putting an aura in the room. But I believe this was actually first identified by a British officer back in, as I said, I think in the 15 or 1600s, something like that, was considered to have found it. But as we said, there is evidence that native peoples were using this material. And again, it was theorized that it had fallen much, much earlier than when it was found, which is, you remember how old a fossil is representing that ancient life, or certainly something like a meteorite. It's the levels of fascination of this stuff they're endless.
But is that why you get into this to begin with? Because you are obsessed with sort of, or interested, I don't want to say obsessed, interested in the origins of the universe, because this is everything we're kind of surrounded by. There are, as you say, there are pieces that are millions of years old. Certainly the tooth in front of you, we'll get to in just a moment. But these are things that sort of explain from whence we came.
But they do. The only irony of it, and I think you and I love kind of the little mind vitamins that we can find from time to time in these things, are that, you know, ostensibly the minerals are probably much, much older than even the fossils of the things. And oftentimes the origin of a meteorite, if it's coming off of an asteroid or something like that, you know, would be infinitely old as well. Yet in those contexts, we're typically not interested in the time component. Whereas with fossils, that's always the age of a given fossil is always the most important thing, because the geologic time scale is kind of how we chronicle life on the planet, which really, when it comes down to it, that's the ecosystem we're part of and what we're focused on the most. So my fascination, I think, began as a child with rocks that were colorful because it was so unusual. Again, I think people who know me know my little story that my grandfather gave me a rock and a book when I was 9, and instead of kind of growing out of that phase to anything else, I just kind of stuck with me. So I finally found a way. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but I kind of feel I got here through a very circuitous route, but I feel like I was kind of destined to have the job I had. and that's a pretty neat, that allows me to sleep at night when I'm not working.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating to me. You talk about all kids love rocks.
Yeah,
and certainly
absolutely.
my son, even long before I ever thought about working in Heritage, would love to go because I used to work across the street in Heritage at the newspaper where I worked. And we would go across the street just to see when there were, gems. And he came to get a dinosaur tooth when it was a Heritage giveaway about 15 years ago. As you put it, who sticks with it and becomes obsessed with sort of where it came from and what it means.
Well, the other thing I will add to that, Robert, that's a very good point. What I will throw on there is that, I think also it's the realization at whatever point you get into this, kind of how sophisticated this really has all become. We talked about kids and collecting rocks. We even use the term rocks, we don't really call them minerals. But I mean, fine mineral collecting now is extremely advanced and elegant hobby. There are groups everywhere. Anyone go down the road to the Perot and see incredible mineral specimens that are actually on loan from the top collectors in town. There's actually a group called MAD, or the Mineralogical Association of Dallas, of which I am a very, very novice level member. But you see these things and think that's what these people collect. So when you start looking at the values that these pieces command, and I mean, there are incredible publications, magazines about literally collecting of just rocks and minerals. This is not just something for oil and gas geologists to get excited about. This is a really hardcore thing. There's major gem and mineral shows. There's a huge trade in this business. So it's really becoming a more mainstream type hobby, if you can call it that. And I think that's followed suit with, people joke about these guys that dig fossils. They're wearing their old ratty jeans and t-shirts and digging up stuff in their pickup trucks. But the science behind what they're doing and what amateurs add to the lexicon of knowledge is quite substantial. And I think you find that with meteorites too. There's professionals, amateurs, commercial people, novice people, enthusiasts. It crosses a lot of lines, but that brings everybody together with kind of this common interest. And that's what gets me excited. I know that my consigners and my clients share my enthusiasm to some degree. And, anybody who likes something here probably likes everything here. And that's really exciting too.
Well, so as that interest and enthusiasm for this grows, does that impact the prices that you've seen over the last couple of years in terms of what we're offering?
Yeah, I think it has. I think we're at there's been a steady increase going back to when I first really started attending shows and seeing what some of these pieces went for. Time, there certainly has been a really good rise in that. But I think lately we're on the verge of kind of seeing a secondary spike of these things really starting to command.
Yeah.
And people who have the money are really starting to decide that these kind of pieces, again, I'm worried to say investments because it's really hard to kind of commoditize these unique things, but people are looking at that. And with something like a piece of gold, I mean, we'll talk about this in a minute, but this piece of gold, for example, is a specimen because the gold is crystallized.
Right.
And the fact of the aesthetics of the piece, the mine it came from, so many issues other than the actual weight of the gold go into the value of the piece. However, this particular piece obviously has a certain amount of gold that can be tested and confirmed, and that alone on commodity value gives it worth. So there's a lot of different kind of secondary issues like that as well when there's something like that has a different sort of degree of appeal.
Excellent. So let's talk about some of the other pieces.
Sure.
Obviously, it's a smorgasbord.
It is
of
that.
history sitting in front of us. Let's talk about what's directly in front of you, because it's obviously the smallest piece, but I assume it's probably one of the most intriguing, if not the most valuable.
Well, this is a simple deal. This is actually a sapphire, and most people look at sapphire. Sapphires do come in a number of colors. Sapphires are the result of, or they come from the mineral corundum, which actually is the raw material, if you will, of both rubies and sapphires. Sapphires are commonly seen in blue, which tends to be purple, which is actually a relatively uncommon color of a February birthstone. It's okay. We can't hurt it. That's why it's in this little.
You're not going to.
So that's what I love stuff for a couple of other reasons too. It's 6, so effectively nearly 8 karat. So certainly it's a sizable stone. It's big enough to be quite noticeable. It's certainly indications of heating. Many sapphires, among other stones, are often treated to enhance the color. So this is the natural color of this. It's not juiced, if you will, right? Improve the hue. So I think that's very important. And again, the little subset of collectors who are really into sapphires, that lack of heating is very, very important. Right. Oftentimes, an unheated sapphire can sell for 2 or 3 times what a treated piece like. So I'm very proud of the uniqueness of color, but so that it's an untreated sapphire that makes it special.
Fantastic. Look, the piece that's been sitting there are several that kind of draw my eye. And I guess we'll just go a bit too.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question. I think to some degree this is a little more, universal. This is a fossilized shark, and it's Megalodon. Right? Megalodon, because of movies and it's iconic in literature, everybody kind of knows about it. Megalodon was the apex predator of the ancient oceans, and typically the characteristics of these teeth.
So there may be a glitch or two, but I do think I can see us on the Zoom, which is unfortunate because I don't like to see myself. But I can certainly see everybody here. So I hope that this is going okay for everybody who's watching. Let me know in the Q&A or the chat if you can see us. So I'm fascinated. How often have you seen a tooth in that condition? Because you've said repeatedly that they're hard to come by.
Yeah, I mean, this tooth, for example, came out of a private collection where there are about 8 like this, and 3 of them are in this current auction that's up right now.
Everybody can see us, by the way.
Good. I was gonna. Well, they might be fortunate enough to see us, but we're willing to see this.
Thank you.
We can go back over the tooth for a minute.
Everybody, thank you for quality controlling this particular conversation. It's tremendously appreciated, especially as we continue experimenting with this new format.
It's a group effort. It's a group effort.
So you don't see them very often.
No, not of this. Anything really. Once you get into about the 5-inch size, they're a little bit fewer and far between. 6 inches is obviously a pretty good level. I mean, the Holy Grail is kind of a 7-inch or above tooth, and those are very, very infrequently seen, especially for sale. So this kind of is a wonderful combination of size and quality. And again,
just like yourself.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. It doesn't take much to have somebody understand why this is so impressive. I mean, there's even a little bit of of a curvature to the blade, depending on where it was actually placed inside the mouth. And it's just an amazing, everybody loves shark teeth. It's a spectacular fossil. And again, to think that this tooth alone is just already 3 times as big as a modern great white tooth is pretty mind-boggling to me.
That's spectacular.
So this is an awesome, a little too big for a necklace, but you can certainly put it in a case or do.
Strangely enough, not for you.
No, maybe not.
If you just held it up there, I'm like, no, that actually would work.
Yeah, so it would look like the fossil flavor flavor.
I was about to make the same joke, so I appreciate you doing that. And I hate to do this, Emily, but while she was over here, I was going to say let's get further down the table because, frankly, it's funny when I see these in the catalogs, I always wonder how big they are.
Yes.
And it's because obviously our photography is incredibly beautiful, and to see it in person is really stunning as well. But obviously, my hand gives you an idea of how big it is.
Right. Sometimes that can be tricky. And again, gold often when you're dealing with a gold nugget, it's usually going to have much more to do with the actual weight. In this particular case, as we said earlier, the crystallized nature of this piece, the fact that it's from an iconic California mine, it's presented, on a custom engraved acrylic base. This is a collector gold specimen. This is someone who collects fine minerals that wants, a good California crystallized gold. Not, the fact that there are almost 8 ounces of gold in it certainly gives it an inherent value, but in this particular piece, the aesthetic nature of the rock itself is worth much more than the gold. What's really great about this is there is when certain minerals occur together, refer to that as an association. In this case, arsenopyrite is actually associated with the gold, and that's a somewhat more obscure metallic compound that's not usually in these. So there's kind of the uniqueness of it having some arsenopyrite in it. And of course, there's a lot of gold all around and a beautiful white quartz matrix that really shows that off in true stunning form. So that's a highly collectible specimen that deserves to be in a case with other fine minerals.
So, okay, who collects something like that? Is it someone who collects it for the gold, who collects it for its origins, for its history?
That's someone who is going to collect it based on the same criteria as they would be collecting the Aquamarine or the Rhodochrosite that we'll talk about next. So this is, again, it's a person who's interested in it as a mineral specimen. They're not concerned about the amount of gold, but they are concerned about how beautiful the piece looks, the crystallized nature of the gold itself, and the mine it came from, the California locality, with so many things, the aesthetics of the piece, the different associated minerals, the origin. Mines are very important for mineral collectors, so the same kind of thing is going to be here with a gold like this. So
Right.
this is a fine mineral specimen, crystallized gold.
All right. So one thing that it's hard for me to look. You and I talked about this yesterday. I'm just dazzled by this.
Yeah.
And I'm not easily dazzled. It's my reputation.
There you go.
So look, as we're talking about collectors, we're talking about aesthetics, we're
Yes,
talking about all
yes.
kinds of reasons that folks might be interested in items
Yes,
like this.
yes.
I assume that when we look here, and sort of all around us, that there is some sort of sense of, well, this is just a beautiful piece to display. I don't care where it came from, but certainly there are people who also want it for the story, people who want it for its origins.
Yeah. Well, in this, you're walking right into a beautiful segue and something that's actually going to tie everything back to the original topics we were discussing. This is a rhodochrosite from the Sweet Home mine in Colorado. In 1992, when these were first mined, it really changed the mineral business. People flooded into the hobby. This was an extremely popular material. Quality Sweet Home rhodochrosites are still some of the most sought after by collectors.
Really?
I would argue personally that it's kind of the quintessential American mineral. Any person who collects, anybody who collects minerals that doesn't just have a very, very specific focus, and there are people who do that, they'll collect a specific species or a specific size or whatever, but everybody wants and has a Sweet Home rhodochrosite.
Right.
I mean, I'm not even a serious fine mineral collector relative to, as I said, the others in my group and my hobby, but even I have I have a number of Sweet Home rhodos just because it's so iconic.
You do?
Yeah, I do. This was also a situation where for the first time a consortium went back into a mine with the specific purpose of pulling out specimen minerals. Minerals for the longest time have really been a byproduct of industrial mining. We'll take we don't have a piece of it, but for example, collectors will know the Tsumeb mine in Namibia, which is a world-renowned locality for a multitude of varieties of minerals.
I was just talking about it yesterday.
Tsumeb was industrially mined, and actually the term miner's lunchbox, which you might have heard, was a function of the mine owners would often let the workers to take out pieces like this that would be whatever could fit in their lunch pail. Right. That's how they got it out of there, because technically it would sort of be illegal to remove that kind of material, but it was all, people were into these mines because they were looking for silver, copper, whatever the industrial material were, and these were byproducts. In the case of Sweet Home, if they went back in there specifically to look for specimens that would appeal to collectors. And in this case, you can see that crystal is a deep cherry red. That's actually what you look for. Right. The more red, and if you will, the less pink, better. Rhodochrosite forms in what's called rhombohedral habit. So it's kind of got that offset parallelogram shape. So each crystal is formed in that unique shape. So crystal habit, again, can become something spectacular about a mineral. And as we'll see later, aquamarine doesn't grow in that same rhombohedral format. So it's a different kind of thing. This, again, we talked about the associated minerals with the gold. This piece is in a background rock, which is referred to as matrix. And matrix specimens are often more prized by collectors because, as you said earlier, really want to see. So in other words, this specimen is much more appealing to a collector because it's in the host rock than if it were just the crystal by itself.
Do you think it would have been tempting to is harvesting the right word, that they were aware of that? Because obviously you might have taken the rhodochrosite out of the host rock.
Well, funny, the largest specimen called the Alma King, which is now in the Denver Museum in an exhibit sponsored by the Coors Company for obvious reasons up there. When the mine owner went in there, he saw the rhombohedral, which was 9 inches across on diagonal. So it's massive, and it was beautiful and red. He actually saw the piece on the floor of the mine and then looked up and saw the hole in the rock where it had originally formed, and put that back together. So it is common with certain things to put those things back. So there is a little bit more restoration and repair in some of these minerals than there used to be. And that's often disclosed. Whereas in fossils, pretty much everybody understands that fossils have been prepared to some extent from being dug out of the ground into condition for display. With minerals, it's not always like that, but in some cases it simply has to be. So this is an exquisite piece. It's a great size. It's a wonderful little cabinet specimen that would be great for anyone who, again, is more of a starting type collector all the way to a serious collector who wants a real quality matrix sweet home rhodo.
It's just stunning. While Emily's here, I'd like to get to its again another. And I as a kid, I was dazzled by these. I just thought, well, where do they come from?
Sure.
And how do you find them, and how do you mine them, and how do you make sure that it looks like this when it comes to us all these years later?
Right, exactly. Well, and that's what's kind of, the minerals are mined underground. Fossils are typically dug out of the ground,
Right.
and then of course meteorites will hit the ground and sometimes bury in the ground. So we do have a lot of the same but different kind of thing here. This particular piece is another superb example of all of the points that we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is an aquamarine, so people obviously know what aquamarine is, and people love it for its application in jewelry, and it's a beautiful blue gemstone. You can tell that this particular crystal is quite clear in a lot of places, what we call gemmy. So this is the kind of crystal I would certainly bite my lip if it were to happen, but this is the kind of piece that some people might cut up to make gemstones
I was
out of.
just about to ask you that very thing. Is it possible someone buys this and then carves it up?
It is possible, but in this case, I think, as we talked about with the gold, the aesthetic value of the specimen makes it worth much more than the material as cutting rough, which is what you would call it in the trade. And there's a couple things here. This is, again, I want to go back to another mind vitamin because I love this. This particular aquamarine belongs to a category of minerals called beryls, and beryls are actually defined by color. So they are actually structurally the same, but the color is different. Yellow beryls are called heliodors, pink beryls are called morganites, green beryls are called emeralds, and blue beryls are called aquamarine. So that's an aquamarine and an emerald are very, very similar, but the color is what defines what we call them. So in mineral parlance, we would actually appropriately refer to that as beryl variety aquamarine.
Got it.
Just like we might really say, in truth, we might say amethyst variety quartz. This particular piece, you have a very good sized crystal, extremely well formed, incredibly gemmy with, like water clarity on the top. And then, as we've talked about, it'll be loose in there.
Right,
it'll be loose in there.
This is why I'm not allowed to handle anything in the building.
That's right.
I'm barely allowed in the building.
Yeah, and that scares me because I haven't moved that fast since 1982. But okay.
That's very impressive, by the way. This is why the video previews were always much better.
Certainly. But what I also like, again, we've talked about association context thing. This has this little beautiful crystal next to it, which we'll call a sidecar. And as you can see from the shape, this piece has been sort of fondly but appropriately nicknamed the ram's horn. So you can kind of see how this goes. So again, as a collectible piece, this association even makes it worth more than if we just had the crystal by itself.
Yeah.
Again, gives you context, gives you association. And I don't know whether you actually like fine minerals or not, whether you collect fine minerals or not. I challenge most people to tell me that's not beautiful. And when you think that that was naturally formed, I mean, how are you not still, overwhelmed by seeing that? How does that still not mystify you? I mean, it's really amazing what's in the earth and what we've been able to take out of it. And something like this, again, that actually can be owned privately. You can see things like this in the museum, but this is a piece that anybody can take home.
Or almost drop off the pedestal.
Well, that's true. Could have been broken, and then the value might go down a little bit. So
I believe my paycheck would have gone down.
It would take care of that. But I mean, again, a beautiful example. And aquamarine, I forget offhand, but aquamarine is a birthstone for one of the months. What a unique way to give somebody some kind of special present like that. But I mean, these are all really what I would call sort of serious collector grade specimens. Doesn't mean anybody can't have them and buy them, enjoy them, but serious mineral collectors will be enthralled by all three of the minerals on the table.
Right. All right. So let's go from minerals to what's sitting behind you.
Okay.
Look, when I was a kid, when I discovered I could find petrified wood somewhere, I was always, that to me was cooler than a rock. In fact, to this day, when I take my long walks, I'll see something on the ground and I'll go, I hope that's petrified wood. Yes. My son has a collection of rocks that he insists from the time he was 3 to 16 were petrified wood, but that's clearly an extraordinary specimen. But it's also interesting because you talked earlier about the preparation of items. So how is that prepared? Obviously, it's
Right. Well, this is one again where, like I said, I sort of love the storytelling, or at least the informational part, as much as I can feel like an educator. You know, one of the problems is petrified wood is commonly found in Texas, and petrified palm wood, which will often have that dark black heart and the little porous can around it, is actually technically our state rock, if you can believe it. They don't call it our state fossil, but it's the state rock in Texas.
Really?
It's petrified palm wood.
how did I? I'm a native Texan. I have no idea.
Well, and you probably don't know that topaz is your state mineral. You know, there's a lot of things you wouldn't know just because you wouldn't. I mean, it's just kind of their fun facts. But the interesting thing is that this kind of beautiful, colorful wood, unfortunately, is not really found in Texas. So this is what I would call classic Arizona, what we call rainbow wood. This is from private ranch lands adjacent to what's the Petrified National Forest that most people know about outside of Holbrook, Arizona. The colorful wood is typically what's most coveted. Obviously, there are beautiful pieces of wood from places like even the Pacific Northwest that might have browns and creams and incredible rings and patterns and things, but across the general population, color is king, just like it is with minerals. That's what people want to see. So this is a slab, you know, sliced off a petrified log. Typically, they ask you have to use a diamond band saw because the silicate is so hard to prepare it. This has obviously been cut and polished to reveal this beautiful reflective face to show the colors and the patterns of the original wood. So there is some preparation going into this kind of a fossil and a lapidary item. A lot of times the back will have a small reinforcement, you know, even though it's very, very sturdy, you know, and some of the larger pieces will even have wood backing like that to be used as tabletops, furniture, things like that. It also is effective. You know, you really can't hurt this. If I took out my car key, I could go like this and wouldn't really scratch it. It's pretty durable material. What I love is just, again, the story and put it in, I love that word used earlier, context again. About 200 million years ago, if we can even get our head around that kind of time period.
I don't know what happened last week.
That's you know, during the Triassic, when dinosaurs were first starting to make their appearance, here in what's now modern day Arizona, you have this large forest of essentially a pine. That's not really a pure pine, but a conifer pine-like tree. And these trees would fall over when they died. They would roll into an ancient river, and they all got kind of formed into a log jam and piled up with about 2,000 feet of overburden.
Right.
Well, in terms of fossilization, a lot of times you need something to be preserved right after it dies so that you don't have wind, water, predator erosion kind of taking place. In this case, these trees died and then they were buried immediately. And as you can imagine, trees, much like our human bones, have a porosity to them because they're an organic matter. So through what's called capillary attraction, when water flowed through this basically mound of material, through capillary attraction, metal salts and things were absorbed in it, and the actual organic wood, cell by cell, was permineralized into silicate or a quartz rock with colors caused by metal salts. I mean, again, the stories are magnificent, whether you look at them as hard science or just something that is great cocktail fodder. I mean, it's an incredible story, no matter how, from whatever depth and level you want to take, but it results in something absolutely beautiful. And again, I don't know who's not going to look at this, not think this is a stunning, striking, decorative item that also happens to be collectible, also represents a living thing that's over 200 million years old. Right. And that, that is still, even now in this case, granted, there will be other slices potentially off the same log that might look very, very similar to that, but it's still like everything else we have is a true one-of-a-kind item. It's got a beautiful remnant of the bark rind around the back. You have so many colors, including the classic rust reds and blues and magentas for which this wood's so well known. And again, this is a decent sized piece, as you can see, but there are many smaller and many, many larger examples of quality petrified wood like that.
Am I a dummy for looking at that and going, what are the rings?
Well, some of it is actually still there. You do see certain patterns. They might radiate from areas other than the core, and some you can actually see concentric rings in there. There is, if you looked at it at a more microscopic level, you would see that. But in this case, this is actually just a wash of color, and it has to do with how it was fossilized.
I think we might. My internet connection is not has crashed here, so maybe the door. I do think our door is an extraordinary barrier to Wi-Fi signal reception. There you go. It's we're now back.
It is back. Okay. Well,
Well, we're wrapping it up here in just a moment. But look, ammonites, that may be one of the few things that I actually know a little bit about.
Yes.
I know just enough to be stupid.
okay.
So this comes from the Volga River, is that correct?
Yeah, and that area in Russia is known for a lot of really good fossils, including ammonites, and often pyritized fossilization, where the mineral pyrite, or as most people, and again, the kids and enthusiasts might call fool's gold, will actually be the agent of fossilization. So as you can see on the rim of this piece, you can see that the mineral pyrite gave that little metallic band around the outer periphery of this particular specimen. This was obviously a quite sizable ammonite. It was cut in half and polished to reveal this beautiful interior. And you can see the golden calcite, in this case, the mineral replacement of some of the chambers. Some are still left open like that. And again, I can't resist the tie-ins and the mine vitamins of everything. Ammonites were, basically there's their giant shelled cephalopod creatures that lived in the oceans. All ammonites died out at the end of the Mesozoic when all the dinosaurs died. So whatever caused the extinction of dinosaurs had the same impact on the ammonites. So something that happened to the temperature, salinity, the water, same thing happened to the dinosaurs on Earth. You have these pieces it's argued, but ammonites kind of naturally represent the golden ratio. They're sort of a perfection to the form of the ammonite. You can see the chambers, how it kind of grows in this beautiful spiral.
That's the thing that was fascinating about it, because you can there is an aesthetic sort of quality to it that you're easily able to judge.
Yes.
Other things you don't know. I can't tell you if that's the most beautiful.
Right.
I can tell you, well, that's a hell of an ammonite.
Exactly. And what I will say too, and this is just so I can kind of, at least fake people to think that I do know what I'm talking about.
Oh, please.
Is that the two things that the ammonites are just one actual classification. And there are two particular things, and this is nerd science 101, but the complex suture level, the suture lines on a lot of ammonites, you will see squiggly patterns all over the exterior.
Right.
Those are suture lines that represent the septa, or the divisions inside the shell where the chambers are formed. And in ammonites, they are complex. In other days, you looked at a modern chambered nautiloid, they will have the lines on the shell, but they're extremely geometrically evenly spaced. The second thing is there is an organelle, if you remember your biology, an organelle called a siphuncle, which was a tube that these creatures would blow, would fill up with gases to move up and down like a submarine.
Right.
On ammonites, it's marginally placed. So sometimes in the exterior of a fossil shell, you will see the little channel groove representing the tube. And a nautiloid, they're internal, they're in the center, so you never see them. Right. So if you're scientifically wanting to diagnose an ammonite, it's got marginal placement of the siphuncle and complexity of the suture lines. We don't really care, because that's a beautiful ammonite that represents something that dates to the Jurassic. So again, you can think about the large sauropod Jurassic dinosaurs living in what's now the United States, when this kind of creature was populating a I don't know how this, I can't get out of the fascinating, the backside has kind of a ridge pattern and it's dark. So, I mean, you sometimes have, two different contrasting sides of these things that are both beautiful for display.
Right.
So you can do a lot of things like that. But I mean, that's a big, that's a lot of ammonite.
I'm not going to lift it up.
So it's kind of great. But I mean, this is just, this is just a sampling. I mean, I wanted to kind of cover our six main groups, which are fine minerals, golds, fossils, meteorites, gemstones, lapidary art. But we have.
Wait, somebody has a question.
Oh, sure, let's do it.
About while we're on the ammonite.
Yeah.
Is the pyritized ammonite in the current auction?
Yes, all of these 7 items are currently available for bidding. The auction's been live for a little while. You can bid right now, and then of course it will culminate, as Robert said, starting at noon on June 17th. So we have a little bit over a week to go. There's been a lot of good pre-bidding. There's been a lot of activity. I think it's a great assortment, and there's good things in every grouping. And some of the stuff, for example, I mean, there are a couple other shark teeth. There's a number of beautiful pieces of petrified wood, some that are actually even from Texas, that are pretty enough to have made it in. Okay,
there's with such surprise.
There's an incredible grouping of meteorites, including a 380 gram, or if you're thinking about almost a 10-ounce piece of the moon. I mean, some of these things are just, you know, I'm the worst person to talk to because I'm so biased, but I believe in what this is so wholeheartedly, and I'm universally fascinated. So I think everything is great. And I mean, that's not a sales pitch. That's because this is awesome. I mean, who wouldn't want all of these things? I have certain representations of them in my own collection, most of which aren't as good as these, but I'm just like,
I was gonna say,
this is awesome.
What do you primarily collect? That was a question that came up yesterday during a comics preview we did.
Yep.
A lot of folks were wondering if there was one piece on this table, one piece in this auction, what pieces would you own?
It's so crazy. I started out really with a fascination for vertebrate paleontology. So I was one who liked dinosaurs, and bigger was better. One time,
So like every other kid
yes,
who's ever been interested in anything.
but at one time in the past, I owned an Apatosaurus, or the big, they call the Brontosaurus, a femur that was 62 inches long and weighed about 300 pounds. So I had a piece that big. Over time, I've kind of come back towards minerals because they're a lot more manageable. It's a lot easier to carry this on an airplane than a dinosaur.
But it's not as cool.
Than me. No,
it's not as cool to carry.
No, it's not as cool as all. But it's funny, you know. I look at this, and as odd as it would be, right now at this moment, and it would change if you asked me the question 5 minutes later, I probably would most like the meteorite. And I'm going to say this from a simple standpoint. That's a meteorite that looks like what a meteorite should look like.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what I think people get. Some meteorites are extremely rare, but it's a very esoteric understanding, right? Because they don't even look like a meteorite. That looks like a rock from outer space, and it's big and it's robust and it's awesome.
And when you touch it, it feels like a meteorite.
Yes.
It's really warm.
Yes.
I feel a charge through my right hand right now.
Right. And I actually, I mean, funnily enough, I have one of each of these already. Again, not necessarily as big and bad as these and this kind of material already. I do have a number of meteorites, but I don't have a really good big museum quality iron like that. So in this particular moment, I would gravitate to that, but I think each of these could be considered the superlative piece for any number of reasons, depending on people's personal taste. They're all collectible, but what I love is they're all attainable.
Right.
Anybody can put in a bid and hopefully walk away with any of these, next week, and we'll be happy to carefully pack it and ship it.
I have to say, the meteorite for me would be
well, we're in agreement again.
I mean, there's something just really special about being able to. I mean, again, I know I can touch this.
You're not. The only thing you're going to break on that is your foot if you drop it. So.
That's exactly right. Well, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Before we go, tell folks how they can get a hold of you if they have questions about any item in this auction or anything they want to consign.
Okay. A couple easy things. My direct phone number is 214-409-1995, and I try to answer it every time it rings. My email is Craig K, just CRAIGK @HA as in heritageauctions.com. So it really just looks like Craig K @ha.com. That's pretty easy. And of course, you can go to www.ha.com/29153, which is the auction number, or just go to the Nature and Science page, and you'll see that a beautiful red rhodochrosite. You click right there to look at the lots in the sale. There's 284 specimens across all 6 of the categories. There's outstanding examples in all shapes, sizes, and value points. And I really do think it's a broad brush natural history sale that truly has something for everybody. I can't believe anybody who would even take the time to listen to this wouldn't look at this sale and find a number of things that they would find hard to resist.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate everybody sticking with us. Again, we had a few technical glitches, but they were easily handled. I, of course, blame the meteorite. You never know what's going to happen when there's a big meteorite in the room. But look, this has been a pleasure, man. Thanks.
It always is great, Robert. I enjoyed talking to you, and I enjoy talking about this with anybody who wants to listen.
Well, give them a call, and you can talk to them. Wait, there's a question.
Uh-oh.
I don't want to make sure we mention
Somebody had to trip me up before.
Oh, nice. Somebody says nice presentation. Well, Pamela,
we appreciate that.
you're my new favorite person. Thanks. She's going to be contacting you about a particular collection.
Oh, good, because I was going to say my mother's name's Pamela, and I thought that would be too much of a plan. So it's not my mom. We'll warn everybody, it is not my mom.
It is not your mom.
It is a different Pamela.
Well, hi, I would like to say hi to my mom. So thanks for watching, and I'll be back next week doing one of these about World Ancient Coins with Chris Bierenbach and Sam Spiegel. So this is a regular occurrence here at Heritage Auctions. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Robert. We'll do it again soon.
Look forward to it.
Awesome.